I grew tons of transferable skills in the film industry. You know, Ryan, because you're a creative person too. Like if that was all just taken away from you for like a 9 to 5, you'd die.
Yes. Hi, I'm Ryan Burgess, and welcome to the Front End Happy Hour podcast, Sips of Wisdom Interviews. In this series, this is where I sit down with professionals across the industry to deep dive into their careers and understand their journey and get some great insights. In this episode, I'm excited to sit down with Jason Torres, who made a pretty bold move in making a career change from the film industry to software developer. We talk about his 15-year career in film and what inspired him to make the change and become a software engineer. In our conversation, we also dive into some of the hottest topics. You guessed it, AI. Jason and I explore how AI is shaping the creative world and the fears that people are having and how it's actually enabling creative people to do more. If you're curious about career transitions, the impact of AI, or how creativity flows between different industries, this is definitely an episode you won't want to miss. Hey listeners, have you heard of Infinite Red? They're a powerhouse in the React Native world, and we're excited to have them as a sponsor of this episode. Since 2015, they've built over 75 apps for companies ranging from startups to global brands. Infinite Red's team of senior developers are the experts you need to build your next React Native app. They're not just about delivering amazing products, they also empower your team by working with your team to share their knowledge. Plus, they're deeply involved in the community, hosting the Chain React conference to over 400 developers and producing the popular React Native radio podcast. If your company needs a React Native partner, look no further than Infinite Red. Check them out at infinite.red/frontendhh. Welcome to the podcast, Jason. Can you give us a brief introduction of who you are, what you do, and what your favorite happy hour beverage is?
Oh, man, I wish I had one right now, truth be told. So I'm Jason Torres. I'm the host of the Tech Commute podcast. We also have a community online and on Discord at thetc.co. You can find all the information. I came from the film industry. I spent 15 years doing production management there. And after COVID, I decided I wanted to get into the software development industry. So I went from one impossibly complicated industry to get into to another one. And that's where I've met some amazing people in the community, such as Ryan, and we've had a lot of great conversations. I like to help people, and I like to bring people together. I like to support good people and good products, and Ryan's always been an upstanding dude, and I've been excited to chat with him. I don't know about this Sips of Wisdom thing. You kind of sprung that one on me. Cut that. See, that's what I don't want to talk about.
You're like, don't make me say that. Don't put pressure on me that I have to deliver some like good information to people that are listening.
I can never guarantee that. I can give information, but no one guarantees it's good. So
it's information. It just is valuable. Who knows? It's filling the time.
That's right.
Someone could be on their drive right now, and they're just killing time. So you're helping them.
I am a great time killer. That is true. There we go. I'm gonna put that on my business card. Thanks for that.
Time killer. Yeah. I love it. And then, what's favorite happy hour beverage?
Oof. So I'm a light beer guy for happy hour.
Okay.
I love draft beer. I live in Western New York, so we have a local brewery that's been around since the 1800s. It's Genesee Brewing. We have a couple really good Kolsch's that they make seasonally. But as far as like a go-to like grown-up drink, I'm a big fan of just whiskey ginger.
Nice. Actually, whiskey with ginger is a nice flavor. So I like that.
For sure. I actually just recently got into, my wife bought me this barbecue whiskey, and I'll send you a link to it. It tastes just like Lay's barbecue Lay's chips. And on the surface, when I tell you that, you're like, okay, that sounds weird. I don't know if I'm going to like that. But as soon as you try it, you're like, holy shit. So what I decided is I put that over ice with ginger beer, and it is out of this world good.
Okay, I could see those two mixing. Yeah. And you know what?
Oh, yeah.
At first, I had the notion of like, oh, yeah, that sounds really weird to like mix with whiskey. But I've had like bacon-infused whiskey quite a few times. And there's something with that, like, we like the smoky whiskeys. And it's like smoked meat, bacon, all that kind of stuff. It's like it does actually go really well. So no, I'm not hating on that drink choice. Good. I think that's a cool thing.
I'll send you a link to that. and I
All
think
right.
you can get it at most liquor stores nowadays, but it's very good. So
All right.
highly
I mean, I need
recommend
to
it.
try it, even if it's
Yeah.
the worst thing ever. I mean, I've tried Snoop Dogg's wine. It's no
Oh,
good, but
oh,
I gotta try it.
yeah.
And then I remember posting that I like tried this is maybe a year or two ago, and I remember a few people were like, "Oh, that's like one of my favorite wines," and I was like, "Oh, okay,
Isn't
sorry,
that such a
not sorry."
barometer? Isn't that such a barometer of like people's taste sometimes? Like usually I can tell if I'm gonna like someone just based on their five favorite movies. Like I could tell you enough about yourself just based on your top five favorite films. I could give you a couple characteristics about you, like, yeah, that makes sense. But I can also tell if I'm gonna ever want to talk to you again based on that list. So
That makes me I'm never going to answer that question if you ask it cuz like it might like or I need to maybe put a little more thought into it. Yeah, anyways.
yeah,
Jason, like let's go into like, your career. I
yeah,
love the transition. Like let's start there.
sure.
Is so you're doing video production and what inspired you to be like, "Hey, I'm just going to switch and like you said,
Yeah.
move into this like hard industry. I'm in a hard industry. I need to move to a new one."
I started, I guess I'll give you a little background on my film career too. I started as a PA on a feature film that they were shooting locally, and I had always been in theater in high school. I did drama club, stuff like that. Um, I really fell in love with the process. I love being a part of something creative and like watching all the cogs fall into place, and then there's this product at the end of it. So I got to PA on a set, and it was, for an indie film, a couple $1 million like 20 years ago is significant. And I absolutely was enamored with the whole process and trying to understand how all the departments worked and everything. So I grew from that. Worked in an associate producer position, which is a lot of just logistics on set. It's sort of an overglorified production manager liaison, because it's like the lowest tier of the above the line. So you're really managing a lot of the day-to-day stuff that the executive producers would want you to do. From there, I went up to, which actually is sort of a downgrade depending on how you look at it, but you can have a lot of roles or titles credited to yourself on sets. It's just really what people want. You see a lot of actors that have executive producer credits. Typically, they're not actually executive producers, it's a vanity credit. Like they just give people vanity credits because that's part of their contract. So usually it's some sort of a percentage on the profits or something like that. So I did the unit production manager stuff on feature film. I moved into TV and commercial work as well, which I started doing locally because I was really hating being on the road all the time. I have two daughters. My oldest daughter is going to be 16 in a couple weeks, and
Dang.
yeah, my middle daughter's 14, and then my son's 7, which he might be making a couple guest appearances here any minute now. He's downstairs. I can hear him. So I talked to my wife, and I got burned out, and like I still carry a lot of regret missing a lot of time with my kids growing up. So we made the decision. I'm going to essentially retire. I'm going to try to find something else that suits my needs. But we had some savings, so we bought a house and we were going to live off that. And I walked off my last film set. It was like March 13th of 2020. It was the year COVID hit. So like the next day, everything in New York State shut down. Like literally everything shut down.
Yeah,
So I was
like
like,
I was doing the math on the
yeah,
dates, and
oh
I'm like,
yeah,
whoa, he chose an
yeah.
interesting time.
Right. And it was kind of weird because it felt kind of like kismet in the sense like that chapter was closed and like literally everything was closed. So I felt like it was the right time. And again, we had a savings. We didn't know what was going on, but you know, no one's working, nothing's happening. So that savings really kind of depleted pretty quick, especially with a new house. So I decided to get a job at a manufacturing facility. I make these cedar belts for John Deere agricultural machines. And I hated it. I hate it. I still am there because if anybody doesn't know and you're looking for a developer advocate community manager, I'm your guy. But I'm still doing that, and I just it's stifling what my talents are. I grew tons of transferable skills in the film industry. And I just, Ryan, because you're a creative person too, like if that was all just taken away from you for like a 9 to 5, you die inside. You literally
Yes.
die. So
Yes, I totally like feel that pain just even
yeah,
in your voice when you
yeah,
said it. I'm like, oh
oh yeah.
man.
It does. It like hits me every time I think about it. It's, I'm like wasting away. And I told my wife that, and she's like, well, we have to figure something out. So I have a neighbor that works for a company that makes like optical laser metrology systems. And they were hiring a bunch of like Python developers, like application engineers. And he's like, look, I mean, I don't know if you've ever looked into this, but I have a bunch of positions available. So I started kind of dipping my toe in Python and got into Reddit and started on Free Code Camp. And like those first couple Hello World moments, like building out those, or even just passing the first couple assignments on the Odin project, like completely invigorated me again. Like brought me back to that creative process that I had missed. And that was it. I hit the ground running. I got into 100 devs because I can't remember how I came across them, but um I really like the way Leon presents the information and teaches, so that really resonated with me, his teaching style. And I ran through that, and then kind of the rest is history. I got onto Twitter and started talking to everybody and networking, because that's one thing, especially in indie film, where you're responsible for everything on a film set and making things just churn every day, and also having to raise funds sometimes, or just save a dollar sometimes. You have to be able to talk and think fast and network super hard. Networking is one of the biggest things that got me through the film industry. So I ran with it, because it's like I know my strengths, I'm going to use them. So I was able to meet a lot of people, and here we are. And I met you.
That's awesome. I mean, I think we've talked on Front End Happy Hour episodes many times throughout our time of recording, and a lot of times it talks about networking. Like we're
Mhm.
always like how important networking is, whether it even just be getting on Twitter, going to
Yeah.
conferences, whatever it is. But like you meet a lot of people and you learn things about like what's going on in the industry, different practices that people are
Yeah.
taking, but then it's just also meeting people, and those open doors, like they
Hmm.
truly do. And you don't know, like like
No.
there's times when I've hired people that I met like 2 or 3 years prior where I'm like, hey, I have this opportunity at Netflix. I think you'd be great for it. And like invite them in the door.
Yeah.
And it's like, you just never know. Or like I've had people reach out to me even now that I'm like taking a break. They're like, hey, I have this role for you. It's like, you just never know. Those networks are so
Yeah.
powerful. So I love that you even saw that from coming from the film industry to even coming into development. It's like, yeah, I want to bring that forward. So very cool. I'm curious to, like you said, quite a few things that I'm just
Yeah.
like, oh
Sorry,
my
I
God.
just
Like,
went.
yeah, no, it's great. This is all things that were so good. I'm curious about like what were like some of the challenges for you moving from film to now moving into like the web of, software development.
Mm. Well, I mean, as with anything that you've pretty much never done before, it's the learning. I spent a long time crafting skills in a different trade. So having to sort of reverse engineer all of that, and just doing it alone too. It's during COVID, I'm learning this, everything's going on. There's no in-person stuff. Which I guess to my benefit, because I did do a lot of networking online, which everybody was doing anyway. So it was already there. The infrastructure for that was already there. I would say it was the learning. It was like understanding stuff that I've never touched before. And I'm 43. Like I'm not a plucky young student anymore that's just like has this learning. Like I've learned a ton, and just like kind of drove myself into habits and patterns of how I do things. And you have to make a conscious decision to sort of break those a little bit to understand these new like principles and systems that you have to learn. And that was hard. I've hit the wall multiple times where it's like I can't fucking figure this out. Like why can't I figure it out? And then I get frustrated because it's like I was able to, in the film industry, get to a very high level, which for somebody from a town, like I graduated with 70 people. um small.
That is small. I'm
Very
very,
small.
very familiar with the small town, so we can
Yeah.
definitely get into
Oh
that.
yeah, for sure. It's like, so for like me, that was a big accomplishment, and I spent a lot of time like honing that craft. So to just have to like take all of that out of my memory and just try to learn this other thing that, again, people spend 15, 20 years learning and doing. It's intimidating. I can't say that there isn't at least a couple times a week where the imposter syndrome and the questioning whether I'm making the right choice happens, but how do you like move past that? And for me, it's the whys, right? It's like the why always has to overpower or overcome the what. And that's for me, no matter how frustrating it gets, I'll always just keep trying to get that goal. I think I've always been driven that way. So yeah, it's the learning for me.
And is that your why then? Like, because you're like, I enjoy the learning, or it's the challenge of the like,
Oh
what's the
no,
why for you?
yeah, my why is my family. It's my kids. It's the opportunity to be able to like be here. My son, we homeschool him. He's on the spectrum. So for me, it's being able to be more involved in even my two daughters' lives more now, and just having the freedom to be available and try to, I guess, for me, my why is like making up for lost time. So
I I love that. I
yeah,
think the flexibility. I think
yeah.
a lot of us are looking for that. Like I
Hmm.
definitely I want to spend time with my kids. I
Yeah.
want to just be there and enjoy it. Like that to me is time you don't get back, right?
No,
Like it's like
definitely
you
not.
said, like even how you're like my daughter's 16, it's like I look back and I miss some of these things.
Hmm.
And to me, I think that is absolutely important. And so if you can find something that scratches that itch of creativity
Yeah.
and makes you happy, but you can still be there, that's huge. That's
Yeah.
amazing.
Yeah. So,
um
being able to work from home, like that's a big thing for me. Like I want to be able to get up. Jack is very patterned, like he's into habits and routines and stuff, and he always asks if I'm going to be over in the schoolroom. This is also his schoolroom, in the morning, and it like bums me out every time I have to tell him no. So the days I do get to be here in the morning, and like I watch him on the camera over here, and I see him come across the hallway here, like, ugh, man, that's parenting. I
they're
know
good
you know.
interruptions. Like
Yeah,
there's times when I'm
yeah,
like, oh, I don't want to be interrupted, but then when they do, you're kind of like, oh, okay, it's fine,
exactly.
it's great.
Yeah, that's
So
the
I love
best why.
that.
The best why. So,
That is a great why. I stand by that why. That's a good one. What's the overlap between film and software development? Like, I feel like there's some things where, like, I feel like
sure.
you and I kind of were going opposite directions. I did all this, like, I did some
Yeah.
video growing up, like
Yeah.
skateboard videos and
Hmm.
graffiti and all that kind of stuff. I was always filming things, but I never really did that, obviously, as a career. And I'm
Hmm.
doing more video now as like a fun hobby. And I see overlap, and I'm like, I want to talk to
Sure.
Jason because I feel like there is a lot of overlap, and
Yeah.
you've probably thought about this even more deeply than I have.
Yeah, I mean, one of the first things that I did when I kind of started getting into it was start to see a lot of the similarities in the two things. I wrote a blog post about it actually, just, even the simple process of taking all of these people and all of these pieces and then building something cohesively together that gets output as a medium for others. We interact with these websites, but behind the scenes, behind the camera, dozens of people and teams and time were all put into that. You have UX designers, that's your art department. you know you've got your back end people, like that's your lighting or your DIT department that handles all the tapes on set and stuff like that, or dailies. You've got your production managers, which again is basically just like a production manager on a set.
Yep.
So all of the things have very similar roles. And when you put all of that together, all of those departments and all those teams together, and it outputs a product, it's mirror images, essentially. Where again, clicks or sales or views matter. It's not a tangible product. It's something that people are interacting with and engaging with. And again, the quality of the content is so important. A great movie does great. A great website or a great, company's site does great, for those reasons. So, um, it's hard to find an area specifically where there might not be a similarity. It's crazy, and that's again why I think it made sense for me, because once I got a taste of it and saw how like parallel it was, that I was able to transition into it to a certain extent once I understood the processes. You know, learning the actual frameworks of the languages It takes time, but understanding the system or the infrastructure of the industry, like, already puts you at an advantage. So that's where I'm at.
Yeah, no, I like that. And I think like just being able to pattern match is so powerful too. You're like, I've built up these skills for 15 years. How do I leverage them? And you're like, wow, hey, wait, there's a lot of commonality.
Yeah.
And honestly, we talked about on an episode a few episodes ago about like coming from a boot camp and a lot of people, like some of the skills that they're missing, right? Mm-hmm. It's like you said, of like frameworks, things like that. You got to learn that, like how to write actual code. But I feel like those skills, I've written so many different frameworks throughout my career, different languages. It's like once you've done one or two, you kind of can start to learn the next. It's, some are easier than others, some are harder, but you can do that. And it's a lot of pattern matching and that makes sense. Yeah. But a lot of the skills missing are some of the things that you just described, of just even understanding the process of how things get done, how you work to collaboratively with others. You're not just on your project by yourself. Like, how do you fit in that, big production to get something out the door? It's understanding that and understanding those pieces. There's a lot of skills in that are actually just not taught in boot camps. No. And so then when someone goes to a job, they're missing a lot of it. So you've already built that up. And that's really awesome too. And so then when you actually hit the ground running, you're like, okay, I've built up some technical skills now to fill in what I was missing. But I also have all these other skills that are transferable.
Yeah. It's interesting that you bring that up too. And it's something I'm assuming you're referring to Shashi when you were talking about the skills, because this touches on that whole Gridiron Survivor project, which I'm fortunate to be a part of. De-risking yourself as a new developer, somebody that is coming out of a boot camp or is self-taught, like they don't. I mean, Shashi and I have talked about this at length, and one of the other members of the team, Chris Nowicki, and myself did a talk at the Atlanta JavaScript pre-render meetup, which is so, and just a quick aside to that, like there was like 200 people there. I've never spoken in front of a tech, like in any sort of a tech conference or event type thing. And now I'm like, oh my God, but it went well. It went really well. But that's what we talked about is, understanding that there's still more to do as a self-taught or a boot camp person, is trying to maybe figure out ways to take initiative to learn those other things like unit testing and debugging, and even just code reviews, like basic things that all orgs are expecting of these people, and nobody is teaching it. It's like, where do you fill in these gaps? And that's why the opportunity Shashi presented to us is so great. But you mentioned it too. It's like, you might have learned a couple frameworks or languages, and once you understand how they operate, you're quick to pick up other ones. And it's the same thing with like cameras or any sort of equipment or a department, or even understanding how like a day out of days works. Once you've done a couple, you understand the process. So again, like the parallels to stuff that you could be doing in the film industry, like I understand, and understanding those nuances and how it works just makes it that much easier to adapt. Yeah, it's crazy. And a big shout out to Shashi for like putting that together, because that's something too. When you're on a film set and you're working on an indie film and the budget's only like $50,000, you do play multiple roles, which is similar to like a startup or a self-taught that has to just build all of their stuff. They don't do testing and stuff like that. So then when you get to a feature film set and there's like 20 departments and there's 50 people in a department, and it's an IATSE job, so you got union guys and this and that, like you're a fish out of water. You have no fucking clue what you're doing. So you're going to stand out. So it's like, if you have the opportunity to fill those deficiencies, fill the gaps, just to become that stronger person, you're going to take yourself off that like green newbie radar and be more, what's the word? Be the best you can be as far as like filling the role for the company or for the production. So if that makes sense.
I think it's, I like, I think it makes a lot of sense of like creating your own like small film by yourself or whatever that is. Like you're like, I produced it. Like I've put all the things together. You're like, I would have had to cut corners because you're just not going to do some of those things. The same thing as like building your own app or building your own website, whatever that is there are things that you just don't do. I mean, who are you code reviewing with if it's by yourself?
Yeah,
Like
yeah,
that
exactly.
probably isn't happening. And something like a code review is a pretty daunting thing, right? Especially when you're new. It's like you're having someone else look at your code. I mean, I've gotten over it. I was gonna say, I'm like, that still bothers me. I'm like, nah, I just don't care anymore. I'm like,
Yeah,
I know that I can always write something better and learn and things like
sure.
that and learn from others. So I think I've just learned to adapt on that. But I remember early days of that, like having someone else look at your code, it's like, it's scary because you're like, I know it's not the best because I've only been doing this for a little while and
Yeah,
I don't know all the things that there is to know. And yeah, it's scary. And so getting like at least some of that practice, like in something that Shashi has put together, I think is genius.
yeah,
Maybe like, let's get into that. Well, you brought up this, and it's like a
yeah.
program that Shashi has put together to basically help people coming that are self-taught or coming from a boot camp, that it's basically putting you in a team and that you're collaborating together to create a said product. And it's putting a lot of the testing, the agile process, the code reviews, all those things in. So you're getting a taste of that. I love it. I think it's a genius idea. What are your thoughts on it? Like when you heard about the opportunity, like how did that even come about?
Yeah, so I've been following Shashi, and I have been connected via Twitter and LinkedIn or something for a while now. He had brought it up because I think I got into it at the end of last year. He was talking about it, and I was like, this sounds kind of interesting. And I feel like because I had been in interviews for a role, and I got to the final, and they went with the other person. Like dude, this was like the first one that I really thought I had. I had somebody on the inside that had referred me, was giving me feedback through the whole process. So I'm like, not to sound like full of myself or anything, but it was very positive. So I'm like, I got this. Like awesome. After one of the first interviews, one of the people on the team was like, "Can we hire him now?" Like
That's always a good
right.
sign. Yes.
So I'm like, okay, this is great. And then it was like a morning, the phone number popped up. I'm like, yes, like this is exciting. And they're like, yeah, we're gonna go with the other person. And I was like heartbroken, dude. Like I definitely, because I was at my other job too, so I'm thinking, I ran down to the break room, took the call. I'm like, this is it. I get to tell everybody to fuck off. This is awesome. To walk out of here with my middle finger. And I just like broke down. I'm like, I was devastated. But the reason I went with the other person is because she had already had the experience. She was like a 2-year engineer already. She had worked with a couple of the other people, so they knew her experience working on a team and stuff like that. So that was my gap. So when I saw the opportunity to kind of work in a simulated environment that works similar to a larger org with those type of systems in place, I was like, I want to do that, of course, because it just cost me a role. Um, at that time, though, Shashi was full. The team was full. So he's like, I'll keep your name on my list. And then if we have any people drop out, because if anybody drops out, usually it's because they got a role. So he needs to refill that spot. And he reached out to me, said a couple people were out. If I was still interested, and I said, absolutely. So from there, we just kind of ran with it. And my roles evolved because I think for what I've been looking for and trying to understand, like what I think would be my best suited type of position. I started on the front, the functional engineering team. I worked in that a little bit and did a couple tickets. I was like, I think at the end of the day, I don't think that I'm going to feel fulfilled as like a full-time engineer. I think me as a person, understanding that like I like to talk to people and I like to interact with the sides and sort of marry the things and talk about the products, that I feel like my soft skills would be underutilized in that. And I feel like
Right.
long term for me, I wouldn't stand to benefit. So I talked to Shashi about it. I moved to the TPM role. So I've been running the sprint reviews, building out all the project boards on our GitHub project. I do all the ticketing and stuff like that, which has been awesome because it's really, again, taught me a lot of these things that you show me one boot camp that shows you that. You know what I mean?
I
Like nobody
well,
does.
I think too, it's like, and I don't blame them for not doing that per se. It's because like you have this short amount of time and people are there to learn how to get the technical skills. That's what they're trying to get. But then it is those other pieces that they come with experience. And that's exactly what it is like that person that got hired, she had 2 years of experience. It's an easier bet too. When you're hiring, you got to think about, well, Jason seems great, but like there's a lot of things he just doesn't know. Yeah. And so someone's got to teach him that. And we've got to put that time and effort in. Not a bad thing, but that's a cost. And you have to think about that. And is the team set up for that? That can be it too. It's like, I would love to take this chance on Jason. He's going to be great. But who's going to help him? I don't know. And that can happen too. And so that sucks. So I love that you're like, I see this gap. Clearly there's a gap because I missed out on this role. Yeah. And so now filling it with that extra, like now building up that skill set, I think is huge because as a hiring manager too, like I would look at that and go, well, he has experience. You've done a lot of the things. And it's like, that's a big difference than, hey, you've built a project by yourself, which is awesome. I like seeing that, but it's like, this is now you have more depth that you just wouldn't have had without it.
Yeah, and at the end of the day, building a project by yourself doesn't mean much when you have to work on a team. Like you have to be able to, understand scope creep and ticketing and knowing like what the expectations are of you in that team environment. And again, like one of the bigger things with being self-taught is again doing everything by yourself. You have to break that habit. We had so many people, and as the TPM, I've kind of had to remind a lot of people, like, do what the ticket is. Like, that's it. You don't need to keep going on it. Like when you finish the ticket, come back with it. If we need to iterate it or do something else or fix something else, and it'll be ticketed another way. We'll do, but taking those extra steps it could be detrimental in the long run. And again, communication with the team, understanding that everybody has that role and is doing the tickets and stuff like that. You don't think of that when you're just sitting in a chair by yourself and you sit for 9 hours building out your front end. So,
I mean, it's true. And then it's also like working with others too, is everyone has these different experiences, right? Like, because that shared experience is so powerful too, is that someone on the team will be like, oh, we can't build that component this way because of X, Y, and Z things that have happened in the past that will now, like, we don't want to introduce that. It's like those things you learn from too, right? Like you learn from others that you're working with. So I love all that. One thing I've always curious on, especially when, working at Netflix, it was cool in the sense that like, we started to do a lot of our own films, which everyone obviously is aware of. And it's like you start to take this tech industry, like a tech, Netflix tech, and you marry it with some of the film industry. And there's obviously, like you and I just talked about, there's a lot of similarities between the two. But then there's also a lot of differences. And one thing that I always recognized was like, man, there's a lot of tech that could help with some of those productions and things like that. And I'm curious for you now going into the tech side, what are things that you would, if you went back to film, like what are things that you would want to see or take with you from the technical side?
That's a really good question. As far as like actual tech, I think that there's lots of places that things could be improved. And obviously the buzzword of AI.
AI everywhere. It will solve it.
Jumps into my head. But there's ways that it could be used and used well. I mean, you see it a lot. I think Adobe's using it a lot in their products as far as for like post-production applications. I think that there's a lot of benefit to that, especially when it comes to budgets. That's probably one thing that in the tech industry we probably understand as well, because I would imagine in a larger organization there's X amount of funds that are allocated to development of this one thing, and so on and so forth. And it's the exact same with the movie. You get X amount to make the film. So if you can optimize post-production on 2 parts, 2 scenes that would have cost $200,000, but now 2 people and an AI system can build out an entire scene with VFX. Like, why wouldn't you do that? But I guess I see the conflict of interest because that could also be people's incomes. And there's always that. As far as from like the actual tech side of it, I I guess I don't really know how I would answer that. What would be an example? Give me an example of what you're thinking.
Yeah, no, I think you nailed it on the production side. I think
Yeah.
there's a lot of optimizations and things like, even just we've seen it a lot with like being able to write subtitles, right?
Oh
AI
yeah.
is
Yeah.
pretty
Yeah.
decent at it. It's not perfect, but like if you could get most of it, like writing a transcript, say like a podcast episode, like I don't want to sit down and do that.
Oh
Like
no.
that sounds
Yeah.
so painful to me. And so having something like AI do that for you,
Mm.
that's a huge benefit. So yes, your subtitles could be, but like I think even some of that post production, if you're doing different languages, right? Like and so
Mm.
subbing and dubbing, if you can do things where it's like the mouth movement is a little bit more tied, like if you can
Yeah.
alter someone's mouth movement to make it look a lot better than what we've seen in the past, that's a huge aspect. Another thing that I saw at Netflix that I thought was so cool was when we did something like the Bandersnatch movie where it was
Uh,
interactive. There
oh
it
yeah.
was really cool seeing engineering team up with the creators and say like, okay, well, how do we make like this arching story? And they built a tool that would allow for those things to change and adjust. So the creative
Wow.
person can make those adjustments. And then on the engineering side, they're ingesting if it's like output to JSON or whatever,
Mm.
like the different chapters and where they can jump
Yeah.
around, they're just ingesting that. But you can make those changes. And so I think like marrying the creative and tech side to enable creative is huge. I
Sure.
think though a lot of times, especially with AI that gets brought up, is creators are worried about AI. Like they're like almost, or at least that's the sense I get, is that they're worried that
Mhm.
it's going to take from their job. You touched on that as like people losing
Yeah.
jobs or whatever. I don't know if I agree. I see AI like, yes, there's AI that can totally, like we've seen some of the videos legitimately generated from
Hmm.
straight AI. I think it's going to get better and better, and so that it will look realer and realer. But I think that there's still a missing piece that you're never going to want to get rid of that creative side because there's just ideas that will come from an individual that nobody's thought of. So I think of AI as a tool to enable things. You're like, I can offload something like
Yes.
subtitles, or I can leverage AI to help me make a storyboard, right?
Hmm.
Like I can give it some input and it's like,
Yeah.
I don't want to have to redraw that. It's like, it will do that for me. And I think about that. It's where it's like, it is a tool to enable you to get your ideas out faster. But I'm curious your thoughts on it now, kind of being in both
Yeah.
worlds.
Yeah. No, that's at the end of the day, and you brought it up when you were talking about Bandersnatch. You guys, you have a lot of those. Click right for this option. It's the choose your own adventure, but at the
It
end of the
totally is. Yeah.
those choose your own adventures, it's basically an if else, right? Like it
Yep.
still has predetermined routes, so it's not spontaneous. And I think really where AI eventually could get is if somebody does, let's say something, you've got three paths and somebody wants to choose a fourth, the AI would be able to generate a spontaneous fourth option, like to be able to actually do that. Because at the end of the day, we're confined to what it's doing or has already done. So I could see where AI could be used to like do more things on the fly to give a more organic experience. Um, but again, I don't think it's ever going to take anything. And I love that you brought up that it's supposed to be like a tool. When I was talking to PJ Metz, he works over at GitHub Education. He was explaining to me that GitHub branded theirs as Copilot because their AI is Copilot because it's supposed to help, not fly the plane. It's
I mean,
always,
that branding is
yeah,
genius.
yeah.
Like, I
It's
hadn't
it's
thought of it that way, but it makes
no, I
sense.
know, neither have I. So I see where it could definitely evolve into like niche stuff, but I don't think that it's ever going to take over like what humans can create because we are spontaneous. Like we
Yeah.
do have the ability to change. We don't have to have those like predetermined options for ourselves. And it's interesting too that you brought up like the captioning and the subtitles and stuff because I've been playing with a product because they have an open role. So I'm trying to like shoot my shot. Called 11 Labs, and they have like text to speech and AI voice generators, and you can like record a video and it will caption it and put different voices and all that stuff. And it's actually pretty cool. You can clone your own voice, stuff like that. It's pretty
Which is
wild.
creepy, but it's like
Yeah.
for post production, that's so powerful. Is like,
Yeah.
oh, that actor just didn't say that word
Mhm.
correctly, or I need just a bit, it's some background noise, whatever.
Yeah.
And if you're like, I can take the essence of their voice and tell, say that
Mhm.
again, that's huge. That's so powerful. Like that
Oh yeah.
saves a lot of time and money too. Does anybody really want to do that? Like as the actor, do they want to go, oh, I have to
No.
reshoot that?
No.
Does the director want to reshoot? Does lighting, anybody?
See,
They're like that. They don't want to do that. So offload that.
yeah, and that's the thing too, is like there's additional cost to that. Like if you have to do pickups, which happens often, they have to reshoot entire scenes. It costs, depending on the size of the film, that's thousands to millions of dollars of
Yep.
cost. Like that is a huge cost. ADR, which again is like if they flub lines and they have to come back in and they have to do re-recording of lines, so they watch themselves and they try to like time it. I can guarantee you that you've seen videos or films or TV shows where you can tell when there's been ADR or voiceovers and stuff. The
Yes.
quality is so obvious.
Yes.
It's terrible. It's terrible. So if there's ways to alleviate that or prevent that, that again isn't at a cost to the production, I don't see why that would be disadvantageous. So I definitely see where it could work and be a benefit, but as far as it like actually taking whole jobs away and the big like panic that was a big thing like a year or two ago with that Devon, what did
Oh
that
yes.
end up being? Um, the mass hysteria of these things sometimes I think always exceeds what it ends up being. So
I think it too, going back to like the creative person in it too, is I think that even AI, like I think people think of it as, oh my God, AI is just going to be able to generate everything and there's no need for anyone anymore. I don't see that, obviously, like just in our conversation, it's more of a tool. But to that point, is that I think AI or things that are created, it just opens the door for more people so that they
mhm,
don't have to go deep into learning how to do video production or doing all the little details that are there. They can still create their idea
yeah,
and get it out the door. But also, you still need taste, right? Like AI is not going to
oh,
have the taste and the quality and the things that you need to do. And so I think that that's still important. Someone who creates a song, I'm not good at that. That's not something I can
yeah,
do. So I don't think going to AI that can generate music, it will be better than I could have done on my
sure,
own, but it's still not going to be at the level of someone who truly understands and knows how to create something amazing. The taste that's there, they
mhm,
still have that, and they're just leveraging AI as that tool. I think
yeah,
that's where I'm like, my head is completely at.
yeah,
It's like, it's just going to open the door for more people to create things, which I think is cool. That's
mhm,
awesome. But at the end of the day, it's like you still need that taste for it to be great.
yeah,
And then it also sparks more ideas. Like if I'm seeing more content from more people and more ideas, I get inspired and that could create something that nobody's even thought of. So I think it's all in all, there's pros and cons on it, but I don't know if I buy the whole like it's going to take everyone's job. It will take some. It will absolutely cut some of those jobs,
sure,
but hopefully what it does is cuts the things that people don't enjoy doing so they can apply their brain to something else.
yeah. I agree. I think that those real entry level or even maybe the high level, because people can probably get an engineer that's comfortable using an AI tool at a little bit less, that can do the functions as far as like producing the same amount. I don't know, that'll be interesting, but like I said and you said, I don't think it's going to take all the jobs. I just think it's impossible. Taste is super important. You could never replace even just CGI and visual effects. You know, we've taken, what is it? When did Terminator 2 come out? Was that 92? 1992,
It
something like that?
sounds about right. I was going to say like early 90s,
Yeah.
91, 92.
So
Yeah.
30 some odd years ago. And if you look at how special effects or visual effects have changed, you can still tell when something's CGI.
Yeah.
So in 30 years of technology innovating in that just that thread of visual effects, you can like I saw Wolverine and Deadpool, and some of the visual effects were so bad. Like, and
Because
this
they're
is
all CGI, right? Like
right,
it's
right,
noticeably, yeah.
yeah. So there's no way that you're going to be able to just one for one mirror what humans are capable of doing,
Right.
regardless of what it is. And most people won't be working in 30 years. So it's like if the technology gets that far, like I'm hoping I'm not working, but um, nobody can replicate with a computer what a human can do like that. That's I always love practical effects on film sets. Sure, some of them might be a little more dangerous, but I always have respect for Tom Cruise for doing all his own stunts and like wanting to be able to do that because he understands like that visual medium has to be told that way. Like doing
Right.
it with computers does not give you that feeling. And I think that'll be a big thing for AI too. Like you said, the talent and the value that the human element brings to it can't be replicated. So
No. It becomes that tool again. So
yeah.
before we wrap up, I'm curious, what's a piece of advice that you would leave someone who's like, I'm not enjoying my job and I think I should try something different.
All right. So somebody doesn't like their job. I would say get out as fast as you can because if you don't, you won't.
It's not going to change, is what you're
No,
saying.
no, it won't. You have to make it like that's I don't know, that's just something in life. I think a lot of people grin and bear it. Is that the saying?
Yeah.
They're miserable, but things are okay. I make a paycheck, everything seems all right, but they're miserable. They end up drinking their lives away to like cope with it or whatever. And it's like you could do better. You could find something that you're really passionate about. There's things out there. Just don't settle into it. Figure out a way to get out and get out before you can't. So
I love that. So well said. Jason, thanks so much for joining me.
heck yeah, man. This is awesome.
Yeah, this is so much fun. I feel like we could keep going and talking. Where can people get in touch with you?
Yeah, Twitter. Twitter's my big one. At Jason Torres. I tried to get Jason Torres, but this guy basically told me to F off because I messaged him. I was like, look, man, you haven't used this account in years, what it looks like. I was like, can we, like, I'll give you a couple bucks or something. And then he blocked me. So I'm actually blocked by myself on
That's
Twitter,
awesome.
which is interesting. Yeah. It's like, dang, okay. But yeah, Jason Torres. I'm on LinkedIn and stuff. I don't use that as much. So Twitter definitely the place to go.
Awesome. Well, thank you so much for joining us and
Thank
sharing,
you.
just insights into your career journey. And yeah, thank you.